Good morning. It's 4 minutes after 10 and you are listening to James O'Brien on LBC. It's also Friday, August the 26th, 2022. And I want you to remember that date because I think it might be significant. Friday, August the 26th, 2022, the day upon which it was announced that your energy price cap, i.e. the sort of maximum average, as it were, is set to rise by 80%. This follows a rise in April of 54% and a mooted rise in October of 80%. That's the one that's coming now, taking a typical bill to £3,549 a year. On January the 1st, it's predicted that it will go up another 51%, taking it to £5,386 a year. I don't know whether I need to remind you what it was a year ago or 18 months ago. But the first point I want to focus on this morning is not the rise, it's the date. Friday, August the 26th, 2022. A day upon which a metaphorical bomb went off in every household in the country. And the government, the elected government of this country, has not put a single member up for interview. Listen, occasionally I childishly point out that none of them will appear on this programme because they are fearful of robust questioning. But set that aside for the moment. They're not appearing anywhere. The elected government of this country, on a day of unprecedentedly bad news in the arena of domestic energy bills, it's hard to think of something more intrinsically tied to infrastructure and essential services, the government of this country has not put up a single representative to speak to the population. I'm going to pause for a minute and let that sink in. I may even do a Tom Swarbrick style pause and run the risk of our emergency tape kicking in. Not a single person, not a Scooby-Doo, not a syllable, not a sniff. I mean, I don't think today we can ask why. There are some reasons that perhaps could be filed under rational. The notion of us being in this curious period, this curious interregnum, Boris Johnson delinquent and derelict from the very beginning of his premiership, so no surprises that he would be utterly absent from the fray. And I suppose in lukewarm defence of his position, he's not really able to make any major announcements about what future policy may be because they could be disowned on September the 5th by his successor. But there's nothing. The boss of Ofgem has admitted that the rise would be devastating for many families. He has essentially said that it's now beyond his remit. This can only truly be addressed by government. And they won't put anybody up to talk to you, not even to say, I'm so sorry that we can't do more, but we have to wait until the new person is in place. And the new person, most likely to be Liz Truss, spent much of yesterday insulting the French. It's a very, very strange state of affairs, isn't it? So a typical bill is going to be £3,549 a year, an increase of 80%. A typical family in England, Wales and Scotland will now be paying nearly £300 a month. Charities and others are already warning that some people may not be able to afford both heating and food. The boss of the regulator has said that the rise will be, and I quote, devastating for many families. And the government haven't put anybody up. I'm not going to focus on that bit because it's not important in the context of how you're getting on. I mean, the people whose job it is to help are absent without leave, completely quit the field, fiddling while Rome burns. But I want to know what this means to you. And I've got another issue here. I've got another problem here, which is, of course, the fact that we are myriad, aren't we? We are legion now together in the mornings. We have hundreds of different perspectives. Some of us are, going to be okay, going to be quite well insulated from this. Some of us are going to be like bang up against it, and some of us are going to be right over the cliff edge. And I don't know what my priority is on a morning like this. I think my priority is to make sure everybody knows how serious this it is, whether or not they're likely to be directly affected by it. 9 minutes after 10 is the time. Should we do an early Idiot's Corner just to cheer ourselves up? Rupert's been in touch. He says, you were a cheerleader for Greta Thunberg. This is where net zero leads us all, which is a bit like having absolute prat tattooed across your forehead. But there's a lot of it about. I'd remind you that Rupert almost certainly voted for the government that is currently completely absent from the field. Although, perhaps they could have put out Nadine Dorries to make Rupert's absolutely asinine point about Greta Thunberg. I'll tell you one thing. Imagine if Insulate Britain's warning had been heeded when they were stopping all the traffic late last year. Imagine if we had all turned around and gone, yeah, actually, let's insulate as many homes as we can. Don't let the perfect be the enemy of the good. We're not going to be able to do them all, and we're not going to be able to do it perfectly, but let's just mobilise absolutely major forces to insulate as many homes as we can, because then when the energy bills go through the roof, every single insulated home in Britain is going to have smaller bills than they would if we hadn't been insulated. But everybody was too busy telling you to get cross with the protesters rather than with the imminent crisis, which we are now staring in the face. 10 minutes after 10 is the time. Quite a few of you pointing out this is a government where Dominic Raab stayed on his sun lounger as the evacuation of Kabul fell to pieces. Boris Johnson, of course, refused to come back from holiday when he was Mayor of London and riots were underway. We know he's been on two holidays in the last month. While this well-predicted and well-known and completely foreseen price cap rise was heading down the rail tracks towards us. So your typical annual bill is currently $1,971, and it is about to reach $3,549. It's absolutely bonkers. You go back to the summer of 2020, and it was just over $1,000. In fact, it dipped even in the winter of 2020, 2021. It was the lowest it's been in 2 years. And now you're looking at in excess of tripling. It's a 300%, a 350% increase. And the government haven't put anybody up for interview. I've got to move on from that now. I just felt I should point it out to you because it makes me want to punch somebody. I've got to be honest with you. It makes me livid. Tom took a call yesterday from a fella who was frightened, actually frightened. And the people in charge of the country, in charge of the decisions, in charge of the policy are just twiddling their thumbs or indulging in ludicrous culture war hustings, competing to see who can be rudest about, gender-neutral toilets. So just give me a slap, all right, if I keep focusing on the absence of any members of government from the fray this morning. We've got a much more important guest anyway. We've got Martin Lewis joining us at 10:30. Before that, let's just do it straight. And I'm sorry that I put you in this position, but I want to know what this means to you. What is this going to mean to you? 0345 6060 973 is the number that you need. Okay? What is this going to mean to you? It is arguably the most essential of services, with the exception only of food, being able to have energy, because it's not just about heating, it's about being able to cook your food. It is the most essential of services, and it is a 350% increase over the last couple of years, and it's about to get much worse. So what does it mean to you? You might think that you don't matter. We took a call from somebody, didn't we, yesterday or the day before, a lovely woman who just started by saying, I'm not special, and it gets my peckles up that. Who is special if you're not? Cat doffing, forelock tugging, all the usual phrases that I deploy to remind you of how deferential this society is. But you do matter. Everybody matters. You might think your experiences are, but they're not. If we are not all in this together, we are finished. Just because we're not getting any clarity or leadership from government or much hope of clarity or leadership from the two people vying to take over from Boris Johnson, it doesn't mean that information ceases to be power. We need to know what is going on. I need to know what this is doing to you personally, whoever you are, wherever you are, whether you're an old age pensioner or whether you are a young working mum. I just want to know what it is going to mean to you, okay? The number you need to call, and we'll ring you straight back, is 0345 6060 973. This millions of households facing an unprecedented 80% increase in their energy costs in October is a story that will be different in almost every single one of those households. And I want to get as many of them as possible on the board today. I want to hear as many different accounts of what this is actually going to mean in real terms. And throughout this conversation, just bubbling away in the back of my brain, is that caller from earlier this week who said that his sister-in-law has no idea what's coming. She's already on her uppers. She's just not across it, not aware of it. We forget sometimes, you and me, that the news is not a part of everybody else's life. You know, we might obsess about it and talk about it every day and pick over it together every morning. But for many people, they'll be listening to Toby over on Radio X, or they'll be watching a bit of telly, watching David Dickinson. Is he still on the box? Or just doing something else, or down the park. It's not plugged into the news at all, not aware of what is on the horizon. The first they'll hear of it is when their energy company tells them. And they may not even heed the warnings, the letters that aren't bills. The first they'll hear of it is when the bill drops through the letterbox and they think there's been a mistake. So maybe, just maybe, someone's going to be walking past a car with an open window this morning and they'll hear our dulcet tones wafting outwards and they'll think, hang on a minute, what? An 80% increase in energy? They've just gone up by a tonne since last year. What does it mean to you? 0345 6060 973. And I stress again, we will call you straight back, okay? It's 10:15. 10:17 is the time. Millions of households face an unprecedented 80% increase in their energy costs in October. The boss of Ofgem, the regulator, says it will be devastating for many families, conceding also there's naff all they can do about it. It's all on you or the government. And the government are currently declining any invitations to talk to you about this particular issue. Luke's in Weston-super-Mare. Luke, what would you like to say?
It's just absolutely crippling, really. We've got our boiler broken down as well at the moment, so we're trying to get it repaired, but it's not looking likely because it's 20 years old, and the new boilers need to sort of run on hydrogen, so that's what's getting pushed. And then on top of that, a new boiler for us is going to be about £4,000.
So you find that money, and then you get hit with a 80% increase in the energy bill.
Yeah, and then an increase in the mortgage as well, because fixed rate mortgage is also coming to the end.
Interest rates going up, food costs going up. What are you going to do, mate?
Struggle with a loan probably to cover as much of the money as possible, and then just hate it.
Yeah, I'm sorry that there's not more I can say that would be reassuring. What does the end of the light at the end of the tunnel look like? What you say a loan, if we use that phrase bridging loan, I just need to get through this. What do we know what we've got to get through? Do we know what the other side of the river looks like?
Not massively. It's just going to be more money to try and find from somewhere and struggle through.
What's your domestic situation? Are you on your own? You got a family?
Family. I've got 2 young kids, 1 4, 1 1 year old. So
okay. And can I ask how much at the moment is left over at the end of the month?
About £100 a month. So it's manageable at the moment, but that's going to be taken off in the energy bill.
And somehow finding the money to pay for your new boiler as well. Do you understand why this is happening?
I sort of do, but it's not what I'd expect. I'd expect the government to actually stand in and do something other than just sit on their hands and hope that the markets sort of settle themselves. But it's been going on for 18 months and nothing's really settled. It's all just keep on going up and up and up.
I wish you well. I do. I wish I could say more. I find topics like this with the very first caller, every single time I'm always reminded of how impotent it makes me feel, but it's more than enough about me for one morning. 20 minutes after 10 is the time. Luke, look after yourself. Jessica is in Newport. Jessica, what would you like to say?
Hi.
Hello.
Hi. I'm just calling kind of to talk about how people's situation who can just flip on their head. So, my partner passed away when I was 5 months pregnant. The baby's just turned a month old now. But my situation has just dramatically changed. We probably would have been able to cover this price increase if he was still here. I've been quite avoidant recently about looking at my finances I've just kind of taken everything over that was in his name.
Yeah.
And I'm just about managing. Really, I'm like dipping into some savings, but that was through like a crowd fund that my friend had like put up to help me and the baby. It doesn't feel good having to dip into it.
Because it was supposed to be for, if not luxuries, then certainly not basic essentials. Mm-hmm. I understand.
And yeah, so I thought we were going to be fine. So there's people out there now who aren't stressing about this, possibly. And the point is like anyone's position can change. So the people who aren't worried about this should also need to worry about this, because there are people whose situations are awful and they can't cope with the cost of life now, and things are only going to get worse. And I think it's just something that everyone needs to be concerned about.
It's the wheels coming off, isn't it? And I appreciate that's a slightly inappropriate figure of speech to deploy with the tragedy that you've endured, but that unforeseen event, whether it's the loss of a job or the loss of a loved one, that can just throw absolutely everything off kilter. Yeah.
So you think you're all right. And that's why it's important to care about the people that it's not okay for, because it could be any of us.
I think a lot of politics in the last few years, possibly forever, actually, Jessica, has depended on persuading people it could never be them, it could never be you, it could never be them, and that enables them to vote for policies that entrench the inequalities and the divisions. But this one is the mother of all roosters coming home, mother of all chickens coming home to roost. What sort of decisions do you think you're going to have to start taking?
Well, I haven't registered it yet, so I need to do that first, so I can look at any potential government help that I could get. So I don't know how much it'll improve. But I don't know. I guess I'm going to have to. Is there any point switching providers right now? I don't think there is. There's just other things that I'm going to have to really just tighten.
I put some of this to Martin. I'm pretty sure that the switching option has run its course. But we'll ask Martin Lewis when he joins us in 10 minutes. What if there is anything you can do at this late stage to mitigate the looming impact? I suspect the answer is no in the context of energy provision, energy provider, and other questions about how you're going to borrow from Peter to pay Paul become even more acute and urgent. Jessica, I'm so sorry. I mean, that is absolutely awful what's happened to you. And then to have this freight train coming towards you as well is unbearable. But it is commonplace. It breaks my heart to tell you this. Inevitably, it's the busiest switchboard in the country at the best of times. It's gone absolutely berserk today. Stella is in High Peak in Derbyshire. Stella, what would you like to say?
Hi, James.
Hi, Stella.
First time calling.
Welcome.
I was very emotional with your research, so I promise I'll try not to cry.
Well, you take your time.
My husband died last week.
Oh, I'm sorry.
And he had COPD. And he was on a nebulizer.
Right.
And he was worried about using the nebulizer he had to take it 4 times a day. Oh. And he was worried about taking that nebulizer because he thought it was... Well, our electricity use had doubled.
Yeah.
And he was worried about that coming up into winter. And the other thing is, I was a dialysis patient until I was lucky enough to get a transplant.
Right.
And I self-cared with a view to coming home until I got my transplant.
Yes.
But my transplant doesn't work very well, and the chances are I will go back onto dialysis. I can't afford to have a dialysis machine at home because of the cost.
The cost of the electricity.
Yeah, and the water, but the electricity mainly, because it uses so much power, a dialysis machine, because the whole point of being at home is you dialyse overnight. Yeah. So you have that machine on for 8 or 9 hours every 2 nights. And even if you have a little machine, you're going to have it on at least 4 hours a day. Yeah. And it's just, that's what breaks my heart. It breaks my heart because people like us who are ill will make the choice, are already making choices about whether we have our machines on or whether we eat or whether we heat.
It's that bleak, is it?
Yes. Yes, it is.
I mean, you're looking
and
at...
for some people, it is that bleak. Even now, they're making that choice. Kidney Care had a thing up about a chap, and he was making that choice, and that was last winter.
And it's gone up.
And bills have gone up even more now. And it's just, it's absolutely scary. It really is for people who, we don't know what to do. We're on I'm on, we're those benefit scroungers that they like to call us.
Not on this show, Stella, you know that.
No, I know that, but you know what I mean.
I do.
And it breaks my heart because there's thousands and millions of people like us, and they don't listen.
What?
They don't listen to us.
Who would you
don't care. They don't care about us. Nobody cares about us. Sorry.
Nobody with power to help cares about you. I think that's the tragedy, isn't it? What? Who would we normally talk to about it? I mean, I know it's hard to remember sometimes, but if we were to go back 15 years, say, would there have been? I mean, first of all, your energy bills would have been a fraction of what they are now, and there's a whole heap of reasons for that. But in the sense of there being some sort of social safety net, there being something that would be in place where you could talk to them and say, I'm absolutely terrified about the next bend in the road.
Yeah. I mean, to be fair, I mean, my energy company have been very good, and they tell you to phone them, and you do, and they are, and I'm on as many discounts as I can be, and they're really, and they do help. If you ask, they will help, but there's only so much that they can do. The hospitals don't have the budgets to pay because they quite often they reimburse you.
Yes.
Particularly for dialysis or oxygen machines. But there's so much diversity across the country. And the government have said they're going to even it out, but when?
Yeah.
Because they said that 2 years ago.
When and what?
When, what, and, the full
How much do you think you need to stop being so scared? Not to, have a knees up or steak and chips every night.
I think for those people, I think... I mean, I'm still on legacy benefits, but
right.
I think just to be able to have enough that you could pay your bills.
Yeah.
I don't want to, be able to go out and all that kind of thing.
What sort of figure would you need to be receiving in excess of what you get now in order to feel?
I think if you said whatever the minimum wage, they'd like the minimum wage. I think the minimum wage now needs to be £20 to be fair.
Yeah.
But even if you said at £15 an hour to 8 hours. Sorry, my maths is abysmal. But whatever that was,
120 quid a day, so 600 quid a week.
Yeah, that's what they should be paying, and pensioners. The pension is the same.
Just to have
it should be the same for everybody. And
basic
it should be
standard of living.
Universal income. To my mind, I think if there was that, at least it would help. I mean, and the other thing is the government needs to cap it. I mean, the cap all they've done is make that cap available, to be fair, for the energy companies to keep their profits. That's what it's there for. It's not there to help the customer. It's there to help the companies.
I'm not going to argue with you on a day like today. I think it's a little bit more complicated than that.
Well,
but in simple terms, you look at the money that they pay themselves and that the shareholders take out in dividends, and you look at you worrying if you need to go back on dialysis, you won't be able to afford to turn the machine on, and it is impossible not to see the dots, not to join the dots between those two phenomena.
Yeah.
When will? I mean, when's Armageddon, if you like? Is it when this new bill kicks in? I mean, we don't know. We cross our fingers and hope that you don't get pulled in.
Yeah, I mean, well, the thing is, I found so. In fact, I tweeted it out yesterday because I saw an article. I think it was Scottish Power, but Centrica as well, are going to keep their bills at, was it 11.79, which is what it is now.
Right.
They're going to keep the bills kept at that for their customers, and Centrica are backing them, and they're telling the government to leave it at that.
I haven't seen that. I've seen the Isle of Wight or something doing something, or the Isle of Man.
Not sure. It was an article, and I just shared it. It was This Is Money, I think.
All right. Well, we'll have a look at that.
And I shared it last night, and it and I thought, well, it comes to something when energy companies are telling the government what their policy should be.
Doesn't it?
But then we had that before.
Yes, I see what you mean. The private sector coming in to provide the what passes for compassion with a Conservative government that is completely absent from the fray. It's just not here. It's just not here.
And the thing is, even if you write our MPs, one of the 2019 MPs, apart from the fact that he excludes anybody from and blocks anybody who disagrees with him,
I know.
Won't help you.
I know. And for elected officials, that is probably a breach of the most basic tenets of democracy. Stella, thank you again. As with all my callers, I wish you well. Martin Lewis will be joining us after this news bulletin. Hopefully he'll be able to offer up some help or information, or at least, at the very least, explanation. You can listen to it on LBC, or indeed you can watch it on Global Player. Time now, though, for the very latest news headlines with Rebecca Cook. It is 10:34. You're listening to James O'Brien on LBC, where we continue to chronicle the impacts of this latest increase in energy costs, an 80% increase due to kick in October, taking a typical bill to £3,549 a year. Here's a headline from this morning's Independent. A piece only dropped 25 minutes ago. It's by the journalist Sunny Hundal, and it says, "Why has it fallen to Martin Lewis to save the British public from rising energy bills?" Well, let's ask the man himself. Martin Lewis, why has it fallen to you to save the British public from rising energy bills?
It hasn't. I'm impotent. That's the problem. I feel impotent today. I'm explaining the situation. I don't have any power to do anything. I am completely out of tools to help the most vulnerable, for whom this is a catastrophic, unaffordable price rise that will leave some dying, many others suffering health and mental health problems. And I thought very carefully today about the approach I take on this. And I've had some criticism from the press for catastrophizing. I plead guilty. I have catastrophized this because it is a catastrophe. And I'm now begging and pleading with whomever the new Prime Minister is. It should have been dealt with far sooner. I mean, we've known, I talked about £3,000 October price cap on my TV show. It's recorded back in March. I mean, we've all known this was coming. The price cap is based on a published algorithm with one main variable, which is year ahead wholesale rates. So we've known it was coming. That this is just a crystallization of a number we've been talked about for ages. So all the people saying we need to wait till we know what it is, it's just nonsense. Ofgem would have given the government forward guidance like it did in May if it were asked. So look, it's too late, but that doesn't matter now. I always say, James, the difference between a political activist and someone like me who sees myself as a campaigning journalist is I am not here to try and expose the government failings to ask for a vote. I am here to beg, to plead, to pray that our new Prime Minister understands how urgent this is. And while we've left it late, on the 5th of September, on that day, lays out concrete plans that will stop a sizable chunk of our population having genuine health risks because of lack of food and heat due to this horrible expense, and another sizable chunk of lower and middle earners from having a catastrophic impact on their standard of living.
What would you do?
I would redistribute money from taxation or government debt to lower and middle earners. Energy is a poll tax.
Like a furlough scheme. I mean, you would...
No. I'll be very specific. You
Please.
Understand the nuances here.
Yeah.
I am deliberately being agnostic on the mechanism.
Okay.
The mechanism could be a social tariff. It could be freezing the price cap. It could be just over doubling what the handouts that were given in May were. I don't care, because if I come up with a specific solution, and I have ideas, and there are pros and cons to all of them, then what we get into is a debate over, does that solution work? That's irrelevant. This is not about the mechanics. This is about political will. So I would push the will, but what we have to be plain on, energy is effectively a soft form of poll tax, because energy bills do not rise in proportion to income. The poorest decile do not pay a fraction of the top decile. Only very, very huge houses have really huge energy bills. Most, even you go into sort of, the top quarter of homes, they're not that much more than the bottom quarter. So it's a pretty flat rate bill. And therefore, we're going to have to do something that is effectively redistributive, that takes money away from the highest earners, that comes from taxation, or takes money from government debt, and it gives it to those people who will not be able to afford this.
But
and it's James, I've just been working out a stat, and I'm about to put something on social media, so I'm going to give you an exclusive on it. We both talk a lot.
It's a clash.
Look, in May, the predicted rise in the price cap that the government held was just over 40%, taking an October bill to 2,800. But here's the crucial bit of that people aren't saying. In May, we had 6 monthly price caps. So that help was to last from October until April, when the predicted October to April rate was 2,800, or up 40%. Ofgem, and we objected to this and put in a consultation objected, has moved it to 3 monthly so that firms don't go bust to help with their cash flow. So we now have a 3 monthly price cap. The projected January price cap is up another 50% on top of the 80%, taking a typical bill to £5,386 pounds a year, pro rata. Now, if you average that over the 6 months, that means instead of the 40% rise that was predicted when the help came in, we're now looking at 121% rise over the same period. Instead of £2,800, we're now looking at £4,450 for a typical home. So that means there is a shortfall of £1,600 prorated over that period on the help that was announced in May. That is the scale of the problem. Now, when you remember that a typical new full state pension is just over £9,000 on the new system, £7,000 on the old system, and we're talking about 5,000 bills, and pensioners tend to use more, never mind the fact those on universal credit get less, you can see why this is just simply mathematically unaffordable for the lowest. And there is no cutting back. There is no money-saving expert. You could put me, someone who's been doing this for 20 years, into one of those households and do every bit of magic and trick in the book, and I would not even get close to scratching the sides of what is needed here.
So I'm going to read you Liz Truss's comments shortly and just ask for your thoughts, whether they provide you with any optimism. But before that, what is this going to look like then, Martin? I can imagine, and I see some of the pictures you've painted very clearly, but what will it actually look like in the homes, in the houses of the people who will not be able to pay their bills?
People being moved to prepayment meters, then not being able to put money in. But if you want a very simple answer, it will be dark and cold.
Today's announcement will cause grave concern to many people across the UK who will be worried about paying their bills. As Prime Minister, Liz would ensure people get the support needed to get through these tough times. She will immediately take action to put more money back in people's pockets by cutting taxes and suspending green energy tariffs.
Look, cutting taxes doesn't help the large numbers of vulnerable people who don't pay any tax. Cutting the green duty is about 150 quid. So I said it was 1660. You've got about £1,500 left to go. I have to tell you, though, I think she will do more than that.
Good.
It is political suicide not to. I just do not think it is feasible for there not to be more help for vulnerable people. It's just that nobody can turn a blind eye to this.
But that's public spending. Let's not get bogged down in the politics of it, but she can't offer tax cuts and increased public spending in the same breath without crossing the streams.
Well, of course, look, that's what has to... Look, the political reality is, I suspect, and I have not spoken to her nor Rishi Sunak since the leadership started. I haven't spoken to Liz Truss for years. I spoke to Rishi Sunak
when he was putting together
the May package. Of course I would.
Okay.
And gladly and happily. And this is not about saying, you know, you awful bunch of whatevers. This is about saying, let's do it. Let's get it right. And I got criticised in May when Rishi Sunak came up with his package because I said it was a good deal. And it was a good deal. And I'd spoken to him days before and told him what needed to happen. And I applauded him for it because it was a good deal. And it did help people based on what we knew then.
Before the tripling of the hole it was intended to help fill.
Yeah, and that. But what was done then was right at the time, and he said at the time the government would do more. Obviously, there's been a change in the political. And if Rishi Sunak's Prime Minister or Liz Truss is Prime Minister, and they do something of a similar scale that helps people, I will applaud. I will say congratulations, and I will take the flak from the political, as I did back then, from people saying,
this is why. I understand. No, I get that. And you're going to take flack from one end or the other, whatever you do in this country at the moment. Do you then have some sympathy for the message from Liz Truss's campaign that it would not be right for her to announce her plans before she has been elected Prime Minister or seen all the facts?
No, that's bolder dash baloney and any other B word you can think of. Right?
Yeah.
Look, we have all the facts. We've known the facts for months. This has been going on. There is no reason you can't do this. And with a different hat on, I chair the Money and Mental Health Policy Institute charity. The devastating impact of allowing this announcement to be made without any solution being put in place is just irresponsible. But we have to move past that because it hasn't happened, and we have to go to the next stage of getting the help being put in place. But people, I mean, it is just not the right thing to do. I mean, in May, the government asked Ofgem for forward guidance. It gave forward guidance, and they made a plan on it. That forward guidance could have been asked 2 months ago. Jonathan Brearley would have done this, right? And funnily enough, I think Ofgem have got quite a few things wrong on this, but a little bit of understanding here for Ofgem.
Go on.
Right. So I'll give you an example that I think is totemic of the problems it's faced. One of my criticisms has always been they increase the standing charge, which is the amount everybody pays a day. So now you're going to pay 270 quid a year for gas and electricity, even if you don't use any. Right. Now, that seems a moral hazard to me, and it's disproportionately affects those who are cutting their use on the lower end. Now, we campaigned for Ofgem to reduce that standing charge, as did the energy firms, to be honest. Someone who wasn't campaigning for it, and who I have an enormous amount of time for, was Citizens Advice. Citizens Advice said, don't do that, because it identified those vulnerable people with high use who would be disproportionately hurt by it.
Right.
Now, ultimately, what we needed specific targeted help from government for those high use customers, and the standing charge reduced. But of course, because we have a zombie government, Ofgem had to work in the status quo, even though we have had a chaotic system where there is no status quo and everything is in a huge state of flux. So it had to work without the other element that was needed, so had no choice. I mean, I still would have got lowered the standing charge, but it made that decision. Yeah. So I have some sympathy, and people attack it for the level of profits. Well, remember, Ofgem regulates retail firms. Or the retail end of firms who aren't making excess profits. And in fact, many have gone bust. Some of them have the same parent company like Centrica, which I note gave its 10% of British Gas's profits, the retail end, not 10% of Centrica's profits, which have been big money to help people. But Ofgem doesn't regulate those ends. That's the government again. So I think Ofgem made some calls wrong, the way it recalculated, moving to a 3-month price cap, the 2%, the standing charge issue. I think all of those I would have done differently, but ultimately this is government, not the regulator, who has the power to make the changes that I need.
There is no substitute. Martin, we're out of time. So very, very briefly, a word on the businesses and the schools and the hospitals who don't have a cap on their energy bills. What's going to happen there?
Well, there's actually no change there because they've already been paying the inflated bills. And people ask me, what's the point of a cap? The price cap is effectively delayed rises. Right. It's a time lag issue. So it's delayed rises by 3 or 6 months. Businesses are already, when they renew their contracts, because often they have contracts, and I don't cover business energy, I should say, they're already on the much higher rates, and that many will go bust.
When they come to change their contract.
The help is needed for businesses too. Again, not my area, but clearly, I mean, I've said before, this is a pandemic level of intervention that is going to be needed. Not the same cost, but the same level of urgency. We are in that type of scenario here.
Martin Lewis, thank you, as always, for your passion, but also your knowledge. And that quote again from the probable future Prime Minister's camp. As Prime Minister, Liz would ensure people get the support needed to get through these tough times. It's 10:47. 10:50 is the time. A quick word about Martin Lewis, who you will, if you listen to this programme on a regular basis, know that there are a few people I admire or respect more than him, for reasons that I suspect are obvious. But just a couple of things that I think might benefit from a bit of clarification on my part. The reason why he's at such pains to praise organisations or even politicians and to retain optimism is because the only thing he cares about is his brief, right? Most of us have got a political axe to grind. I've got a political axe to grind. I'm going to grind it in a minute. But he genuinely doesn't. It's why the failure to put him in the House of Lords as a crossbench peer is so awful. He cares only about his brief. So his only priority is helping people right now who aren't going to be able to pay their energy bills, who are going to be sitting in the dark and the cold, to use his phrase. So that's why it weighs on his mind when he gets criticised for saying warm words about something that a Conservative government does, or he may get criticised for saying warm words about something that Ofgem does. But he is the key to understanding him, and it took me a while. The key to understanding him is goals. His goals are entirely apolitical. He is interested only in his business. His fame, his fortune is built entirely upon helping people make their own money go further. And to hear the passion and the despair in his voice is the biggest wake-up call you're going to get on an issue like this. But the passion and the despair have been there for months now. I think it's now augmented by a degree of shock that so little has been done, that the zombie government, as it were, that he referred to himself. But that's the key to understanding him. If it sometimes seems strange to you that he's bothering to address people that were rude to him when he was warm towards Rishi Sunak's original announcement, that's why he does what he does, because he's interested exclusively in helping everybody make their own money go further. That's it. That's what he was put on this earth to do, he would tell you. In fact, I think he did when he was a guest on my Full Disclosure interview, which I really would urge you to have a listen to. So that's the key to understanding him, and that's why, I mean, despite the attempts of some right-wing media to attack him for catastrophizing or doom-mongering, that they are ostriches and their heads are in the sand. He, to continue with my avian analogies, he is the canary down the coal mine. That's the whole point. And it's why the attacks don't land in the way that they would on somebody who was going after politicians for perhaps more ideological reasons. He is entirely about execution, delivery, and goals. And that's why he's always at pains to justify his own positions and cover his own backs. I think the man's a mensch. I really do. I think we're very, very lucky to have him. And if I was Rishi Sunak, or perhaps more pertinently, Liz Truss, I'd have him on bloody speed dial. I really would. But hey-ho, apparently she knows what she's doing. 10:53 is the time. Back to the tales of how these increases, these impacts are going to hit you. And I didn't ask Martin for his advice on what people could do, as I'd said I was going to, because he answered the question without me having to ask it. The answer is diddly squat, nothing, nada. He's got no tools left in his box. Tom's in Telford. Tom, what made you pick up the phone?
Hiya, mate.
Hello, Tom.
Yeah, sorry, first time caller, so a little bit nervous, but
It's only me.
So I work in building regulation, right?
Yeah.
And I thought I was on a pretty good wage. I'll be totally candid with you. It's about £34,000.
Okay, and it is. It's
before
above
tax.
It's above average. Well above
I think
average.
that pins me as a middle earner, I'd have thought.
Mm-hmm.
My partner is a student midwife. So we're completely at the mercy of Student Finance England on that front.
Right.
But we're looking to improve our prospects, you know.
Yes.
We've got to do something. But at the end of the last lockdown that we had, private landlord decided to sell up.
Right.
So mum and dad weighed in and said, do you know what? Come and stop with us just for a little bit.
Yeah.
Well, that was the end of the last lockdown.
Still there.
My dad's not well. He's got multiple sclerosis.
Right.
And it's not getting any better. They're sort of becoming financially dependent on me, unfortunately, because he's requiring more and more care.
So in terms of the household bills in the household that you're now sharing?
Yeah.
Got it.
We've got two kids as well, a girl of 11 and a boy of 9.
Right.
So, and at that age, the girl is, she's going to require her own room.
She wants some privacy, doesn't she? Of course.
Yeah. She's about to go to secondary school. Yeah. She's got into a great school, and, you know, the number one ticket out of poverty is education.
Yeah.
And I'm so proud of her, but you know, I can't keep a family of 6 afloat. I can't keep a family of 4 afloat. You know, so
this
how many mum and dads?
This is just maths, isn't it?
Yeah, I can't. And do you know what made me really angry is there was I heard the British Gas sort of advert announcement slot on LBC earlier saying, we've put aside 250 million quid out of how much did they make in the first quarter? Like 6 billion, something like that?
Worldwide, I think. I'm not sure of the numbers.
Oh, I can't quite remember, no, but it doesn't really matter. It was astronomical anyway. And then they said, we've set up a department to help you manage your finances.
Yes.
And I'm like, excuse me? Excuse me, I've been managing my finances perfectly well, thank you very much. But at the end of the month now, I'm running on a cushion of £1.53 or thereabouts. And you know what?
All the managing in the world isn't going to make that figure grow. So what happens in October when your bill goes up by 80%, when your energy bills go up by 80%?
Well, this is it, isn't it?
It is, yeah.
I don't know is the answer.
Right. Well, look, I mean, you haven't come to me for advice. Part of what the departments that these energy companies are setting up to help you manage your finances, although you're right to feel patronised by that, it is patronising, but part of that will be to address some of these unknowables and to tell you what you can and can't do, and you might not be able to pay the full amount, but you can pay this, and so it's always worth finding out what is available, even as you bite your tongue about the way that they've packaged it.
Yeah, I mean, we're with Octopus at the minute, and they reckon our energy bills are going to be about £800 a month in the thick of it.
What is it now?
We can't afford to pay the full amount, so we're paying £300 a month.
Right.
But obviously, with my dad, who's going to need some breathing equipment at some point, which you've had a few callers
I have.
Today, sort of illustrate just the impact on the household budget there. But, I haven't had a haircut in God knows how long. I haven't even bought myself a new pair of socks. Just trying to, get uniform out of the way, keep everyone fed.
What would help look like, Tom? What would, in real terms?
It's tough, isn't it?
It is, actually. I think we need to acknowledge that, even as we have perhaps, I don't know about you, I don't think I could have a lower opinion of the current government or indeed the next one, but it's not easy. They're not magicians. They can't wave a magic wand.
And you know what? I don't think I can say what I want to on the radio, but a low opinion is probably the most diplomatic way of putting it.
So what would help? What would actually take off the tightest of the pressure on your sort of financial windpipe?
The short and curlies of it is more money, but and while the public sector workers are having a tough enough, some public sector workers are having a tough enough time of it, trying to get a pay rise at the minute.
Yeah.
I work in the private sector, and we're very dependent on turnover and revenue, and I can't approach my boss and say, can I have a pay rise in line with inflation? Because you'll turn around and say no.
I simply can't afford it.
Yeah.
And you don't have trade union.
Yeah.
No, I hear you. Listen, you know how it works. I now apologise to you for not being able to be of more use to you, except perhaps of helping you feel seen, helping you feel heard. But you're doing the right thing, Tom. You know that, and that's what's so gross about it all. You're doing the right thing. You're keeping your end of the deal. But somebody somewhere's not keeping their end of the deal.
Yeah.
You'll be all right.
I think the answer for me is that I can only afford to pay £300 a month going forward, and we're just going to end up in debt, essentially.
Well, there are going to be conversations, aren't there, up and down the country with energy companies who are driven by a commercial imperative, but at the same time, they're not going to... that's what Martin posited, the possibility of meters being put in, which is terrifying. But as you say yourself, you're going to be in a better position than many by dint of your income. Take care, mate, and good luck to your daughter come September when the secondary schools open. It's coming up to 11 o'clock. Bloomberg have published an astonishing graph from the Climate Change Committee. It just takes me back to that chap Rupert in Idiot Corner this morning talking about Greta Thunberg. It was in 2012 that this country recorded its highest ever home insulation rates. Cavity wall, loft, solid wall, all of them. Absolutely huge. And then it was government funding cuts that kicked in. And they have gone down from just shy of 2.5 million installations to, close to a tenth of that in the 8 years from 2012 to 2020. I haven't got the latest figures, but to be honest with you, you'd probably need a monocle to even see it on the graph. It has come down so much. So imagine where we'd be now if the government had continued that policy of home insulation. Every bill in the country would be measurably lower. That's what these idiots are talking about when they say, oh, we need less green measures and stuff like that. It costs money to put the home insulation in, obviously. But imagine what would be happening to energy bills now if we'd continued with those just shy of 2.5 million homes a year being insulated with government support. That's not an opinion, that's just counting. It's 11:01. 4 minutes after 11 is the time. So we'll move on to the politics of it now. The government is putting out pre-recorded clips. That's their response to this crisis. Nadeem Zahawi, which means, of course, you can't ask them any questions. Pre-recorded clips in which Nadeem Zahawi says, yes, we're definitely looking at what support we can offer to the most vulnerable. That's it, just words, which you can't even respond to. I wouldn't expect to have a crack at it myself. Those days are long behind me, but, people who do have the pleasure, if that's the right word to use, of actually interviewing members of the government would perhaps have been able to follow up with a couple of supplementaries. And I'm told that Boris Johnson is going to release a clip later today. I think he's between holidays. He's flown to Kiev for a photo opportunity this week, but apart from that, hard to see what else he's done. So he'll be releasing a clip later today. Until we get hold of the last of the new clip from Boris Johnson, let me play you an old clip of him being interviewed on Sky News by Beth Rigby. It's not specifically about energy crises, but it perhaps gives you an idea of one of the reasons why we are in the hole that Martin Lewis what's the word I'm looking for, so terrifyingly described.
Very
Are you
rapidly.
worried about inflation?
And I'm very encouraged.
Are you worried about inflation?
I'm very encouraged by the growth I'm seeing.
I understand. Are you worried about inflation?
Well, people have been worrying about inflation for a very long time. I'm looking at robust economic growth, and by the way, those fears have been unfounded. I'm looking at robust economic growth. I think that the supply systems that we have, logistics, the supply chains we have are incredibly clever and robust, and supply will meet demand.
It's 6 minutes after 11. Boris Johnson in October of last year talking about robust economic growth in the face of questions about looming economic problems, in that case, inflation. I mean, it is quite hard to know where to start. Wayne in Basildon, who, as you know, is a pal of mine, so I can tell you that he works in the field of home insulation. He says, I can testify to the truth of that Bloomberg report. Every year since 2012, the criteria for funding has been made more stringent, so only very specific people can get help. Most of the surveys I do these days, he goes to your house and does a survey on home insulation, what you need, how much it's going to cost, whether you will qualify for government support. Most of the surveys I do these days are for people who already have a few quid. The skintier you are, the less you get. So one of the things the Tories did during austerity with that post-2012 cut to home insulation subsidies and funding is make it more likely that people who are best positioned to pay increased energy bills are going to have the benefits of home insulation and therefore reduced energy. But the poorer you are, the harder it is to access the insulation and the higher your bills are going to be. Well, but you know what it is. I've been telling you for years. The rich man in his castle, the poor man at his gate. God made them high and lowly and ordered their estate. The mad stuff is that the poor man at the gate is voting for the rich man to stay in his castle. Which brings us to the current government and a rather splendid intervention by an as yet unidentified woman outside Moorfields Eye Hospital in East London yesterday when she happened to stumble across the current Secretary of State for Health. Anybody? Bueller? No, Stephen Barclay.
That plan for jobs has protected.
Are you going to do
businesses.
anything about the ambulances waiting and the people dying out? Well, don't you think 12 years is long enough?
Yes, and we are
12 years, you've done bugger all about it.
No.
People have died and all you've done is nothing.
8 minutes after 11 is the time. And then we come, of course, to the current Conservative leadership, of which Berkeley is, I suppose, a part, but the endless leadership campaign. The calls were clear and they were loud. Truss, Sunak, Johnson, sit down, work on this together, almost like a sort of red button, while the interminable leadership campaign went on over there. Boris Johnson's tribute act to Judith Chalmers went on over there. And then as a sort of third point of that triangle of British politics at the moment, the current Prime Minister and the two candidates to be the next Prime Minister would sit down and actually come up with something that could be announced now to address the fears of all the people who have contacted me. Right? And everybody else. But they've refused to, for reasons that I don't understand. That's why we're going to talk about the politics of it now. What I'd really like you to do is to defend the status quo. So on the press releases that come out from politicians, they often give you a little bit of background. You get the quotes and then you get background written underneath. So the background on the quotes from Liz Truss's campaign today is this: it would not be right for Liz to announce her plans before she has even been elected Prime Minister or seen all the facts. But people can trust that a Liz Truss government will deliver energy affordability for households and long-term security for our country. Followed by a sentence to strike a chill into even the hardest of hearts. Liz has written in today's Daily Mail outlining her plans to support people with the cost of living. She's going to cut taxes, which will, the more you've got, the more you earn, the more you will benefit from this policy. The less you earn, the less tax you pay. And of course, in many cases, among the poorest paid and the unwell, there won't be any tax to cut. So I don't think, well, maybe you will have a crack at defending what's going on here. Maybe you can actually explain it in a slightly more charitable way. But the question I want you to answer is why haven't, because it's probably too late now. It's another point that Martin made. Why do you think, ideally, as a Conservative voter, with those words from that woman badgering Stephen Barclay echoing in the back of your mind, 12 years and you've done naff all. 12 years, that's the bit I don't get. 12 years, and this candidate campaign is being conducted as if someone else has been in charge for over a decade. 12 years, and everything is falling apart. But let's just focus on this. This kicks in October. This increase is unprecedented. It will lead to British people sitting in the cold and the dark, unable to heat their homes, unable to cook their food, unable to assume or achieve the most basic requirements of human dignity. People with dialysis machines or breathing machines, frightened of turning them on because they can't afford to pay for the electricity needed. That took us all a bit by surprise. I mean, I knew about it in theory, but to hear it straight from the horse's mouth, as it were, has been a rather upsetting experience, I think, for both of us, for you and for me. But this notion of government, remember at the beginning of coronavirus, and we talked about clarity and leadership, and we couldn't quite believe there wasn't any. No clarity, no leadership. Fast forward 12 months, they're claiming they got everything right and played a blinder and got all the big calls right. It's a surreal country that we've created, isn't it, at the moment? A truly surreal, it's like a Lewis Carroll country at the moment. You look back over the coronavirus and then you listen to the people in charge and they're claiming they played a blinder. And all the people that died in care homes, and Matt Hancock claimed he threw a protective ring around them. It's impossible to do normal political analysis now. It's almost impossible to do satire. But it is possible to answer simple questions. So, and listen, you can be as Anaraki, as geeky, or as tribally loyal as you please, or as politically furious as you like. The question is this: why have Boris Johnson, Rishi Sunak and Liz Truss not sat down to thrash out a policy which, as senior members of the same government, they would be able to agree on, so that as we approach this Armageddon of October and another one in January, we have at least an idea of what the government will be doing to help? That is the question. What will the government be doing to help? To which the answer is, oh, well, I can't tell you, I'm too busy on holiday. To which Liz Truss's answer is, oh, well, I can't possibly let you know what my plan is before I've even been elected Prime Minister. And to which Rishi Sunak's response is something woke, woke, women, something woke, woke, something. Why? Have a crack at this. Seriously. Particularly if you used to think of yourself as a supporter of this shower. Three of the most senior members of government, until relatively recently, the three most senior members of government, barring Priti Patel, are the three great officers of state after Prime Minister: Chancellor of the Exchequer, Foreign Secretary, Home Secretary. Rishi Sunak was Chancellor of the Exchequer, Liz Truss was Foreign Secretary, Boris Johnson was Prime Minister. They're the three pinnacles of power. He appointed them. Why can't they sit down? Why can these three human beings not sit down together to thrash out a policy that would apply today and tomorrow and in October? I genuinely do not understand. So please, if you're a forelock tugger, if you're a capped offer, if you're an ardent Brexiteer or whatever you're calling yourself these days, tell me why they couldn't do this. They're your people. You put them there. You greased their passage to the top of the poll. Why can't they do this? Why can Rishi Sunak, Liz Truss, not only why haven't they done it, why can't they do it, why have they actually refused to do it? I do not understand. What do you go into politics for if not to serve the national interest, if not to serve the population, if not to steer the ship of state through choppy waters? What's the point of going into politics if you don't honestly believe that you possess the skills to help the population in times of trouble? So here are the three most senior members of Boris Johnson's last cabinet. Or is it the last cabinet but one? It's so hard to keep track with the recent round of resignations. The three most senior members of Boris Johnson's last cabinet cannot, have not, and will not sit down together to plot a course through this crisis. I don't know why. And I do this for a living. And I don't think if you are someone still bending the knee to this shower, I don't think you're ever going to ring me again, are you? The shame and the horror is too great, and my smugness is too unbearable for you. Except deep down, you know I'm not smug. I'm furious. You did this. You were warned. You were told time and time and time and time again, do not put these people in charge. But you did. Whether you were supporting the last Labour leader or whether you were supporting Boris Johnson, you have brought this country to this pass. And the only question left now is why these three people, why these three Conservative politicians, why these three senior Tories have done nothing, will do nothing, and haven't done anything. Come on, give it your best shot. Especially you ardent Brexiteers. Why have they done nothing? For you. 0345 6060 973. 18 minutes after 11, and a quick word about what all the client journalists are doing at the moment to hold the government to account about its abject failure to do anything at all in preparation for the looming energy price hike. They're attacking Emily Maitlis. Daily Telegraph, Daily Mail. You heard me correctly. That's top priority today for your right-wing columnists, attacking Emily Maitlis for telling the truth about the place where she's worked for the last 25 years. It's funny, isn't it, that all the blithering idiots and think tank shills and client journalists are furious at the suggestion that blithering idiots, think tank shills and client journalists shouldn't be treated with the same amounts of respect as proven authorities and experts. Who'd be angriest about a world in which idiots aren't treated by the BBC with respect? It's a crowded field, but Ian Duncan Smith is quoted quite lavishly in the Daily Mail today. 90 minutes after 11 is the time. Why are they doing nothing? Why have they done nothing? Why are they refusing to do anything? Phil's in Nottingham. Phil, what would you like to say?
Hi, James. I've got a very simple theory. By the way, I'm not a Tory voter or a Brexiteer, but I've got a theory why Liz Truss isn't announcing anything now. Because if she was to basically U-turn on reducing the taxes and perhaps, pump in some money for the poorest people, that would potentially jeopardise her leadership with the 160,000 Tory party members.
This is, it's not a simplistic theory, a simple theory perhaps. So she will do something when she gets in, but she can't announce it yet because it would hack off the actual electorate charged with putting her in place.
Exactly.
I mean, that is very optimistic, isn't it?
Yes, I'm an optimist.
So she's not going to reduce taxes, and she is going to bring in windfall taxes and provide handouts, despite insisting for the last 2 months that she is going to reduce taxes, that she would never bring in windfall taxes, and she is going to, and she will never allow handouts.
Exactly. I think she'll have to do something, because I think otherwise there will be a general strike.
So why not all three of them? Why wouldn't all three of them sit down? Because then you don't have it hanging around your neck with the electorate. Sunak would be equally part of the project, and Johnson, he wouldn't necessarily turn up for the meetings, but he could do a quick lap of honour at the announcement ceremony.
He'd be on holiday, wouldn't he?
Yes.
I just think they're probably not capable of sitting down in a room together and having a conversation.
But he was Prime Minister. He made her Foreign Secretary and him Chancellor. But then I suppose the betrayal and the sulking is probably a big... It depends which point of the triangle you start at, doesn't it? Because you've gone for the why won't Truss do it. But actually, why won't Johnson do it is pertinent as well. And that's just because he's a great big baby and he's still sulking.
And he doesn't care about anyone else.
He doesn't, does he? I mean, that's why I'm interested in talking to his supporters, his fans, the ardent Brexiteers and the die-hard Tories, the Team Boris, Bring Back Boris Brigade. Because, I mean, how do you let him treat you like this? It's staggering. Phil, thank you. Steve's in Shrewsbury. Steve, what would you like to say?
Hi, James. It's a similar theory, but with a slight difference.
Go on.
I think that they won't get together now because if they do and they come up with something useful, then nobody is there to take. They're not there to take the credit. So Sunak couldn't take credit. Truss couldn't take credit.
Why not?
Whereas if they, because it's a combination. So once whoever wins,
yeah,
let's assume Truss gets
you're talking about politicians who claim that they played a blinder during coronavirus. They will literally hand you a piece of rock and tell you that it's cheese. They're not going to be that bogged down in the detail of who actually has their fingerprints on something that went quite well.
Yes, they will. Well, it won't go quite well anyway, but when, let's say, Truss gets in, she will do something more than she has said at the moment, optimistically. It'll still be rubbish, but she'll do something.
But she is saying...
look, aren't I great?
Yeah, so, I mean, again, we're all... forgive me, I don't know whether I'm in a... I always get a little more cynical as the week unfolds. So catch me on a Monday morning and I'm Pollyanna. Catch me on a Friday afternoon and it's all they're all terrible. But I mean, like the last fella...
I do that all week, actually.
Like the last fella, you're saying that she's only pretending to be this ridiculous, and when she actually gets into power, she'll be less ridiculous.
No. She'll still be ridiculous, but she'll do something or announce something.
But that will have to be the polar
opposite.
It will have to be the polar opposite of what she's announced so far. You can't fix this with tax. I'll tell you why I'm not as optimistic as you are. I think she is daft enough to cut taxes, which reduces the amount of money that becomes available to help people.
I don't know. I think she will. I'm sure she will. But she'll do something. There will be some piece of news, however pathetic, that she can say, this is my idea, and Sunak hasn't got his hands all over it as well.
He won't even be here. Maybe you're right. I mean, crikey, we're judging these people by our own standards when, in fact, to treat them as petty little adolescents arguing or bald people arguing over a comb is perhaps the right way to approach it, rather than seeing them through the lens of our own decency and compassion. So, yeah, there it is. Johnson is a petulant fool, sulking because Nanny wouldn't let him have extra porridge for breakfast. Truss is an opportunist on a scale that we haven't seen since Boris Johnson. So she's interested only in what is in her own short-term interests, and that involves continuing to seduce the Conservative Party members, and the rest of the country can go whistle. Whether they can afford to turn on their dialysis machines or not is of absolutely no interest to her. So why would she sit down and try and fix it when her priority, her objective, her sole purpose in life at this point is to get on that bandwagon all the way to Downing Street? And Sunak's just, I mean, what an absolute collapse that man has suffered in the last few months. I never mind the fact that it turned out his wife was paying a smaller proportion of her epic income in tax than you are. Absolutely borrowing a car, not knowing how to use a credit card. I mean, just an absolute cipher. And he's not thick. He's not thick. He's just utterly insulated. Why do people like that want to be in politics? Answer: because the status quo has served them very, very well. And they are terrified of anyone coming along who might change it. 25 minutes after 11 is the time. So, what have you got? Seriously, come on. You voted for them. What have you got? Why won't Boris Johnson, Rishi Sunak and Liz Truss sit down together, two leavers and one Remainer who's become an even more nuclear-powered leaver than the rest of them? Why won't they all sit down together and help you out with your looming energy bills? You who voted for them, who fell out with family because you believed what they told you about Brexit. Why won't they sit down together around the table and help you out? 0345 6060 973. Colin's in Harrogate. Colin, what would you like to say?
Hi, James.
Hello.
Pretty much in line with what your previous callers have said. I think it's all about Liz Truss's own political self-interest. I think she's very much like Johnson.
But why wouldn't he come out? This could have been his lap of... He could have come out and said, look...
care.
Yeah, but he could have got a bit of kudos for it. He could have said, right, Rishi, Truss, Sunak, Liz... over here, sit down. We're going to thrash something out together, and it's going to be my last act, my last hurrah, my grand farewell to Downing Street. We're going to come up with a half-decent policy to deal with these rocketing energy prices. So don't tell me about why Liz Truss isn't doing it. Why hasn't Boris Johnson blown his little bugle and summoned them to Downing Street?
I think a couple of weeks ago, you had a caller on that said he's just thrown his toys out the pram and doesn't care anymore. He's been on holiday, hasn't he? So he doesn't care. And I think that, the Conservatives are looking at how far behind in the polls they are now and thinking, well, why don't we make a splash when Liz comes in and save everyone from, the cliff edge and, oh, look how well we've done.
But what's that going to look like? I mean, and maybe she will go Johnsonian on this and actually claim on Wednesday that she was always in favour of the thing that on Monday she swore blind she'd never go near. So we're pretty clear now, despite claims to have been misinterpreted or to have been mistreated by an utterly supine client media. We know that she has ruled out a windfall tax. We know that she has ruled out handouts, and we know that she has ruled in tax cuts. From where I'm sitting, 3 things that will make the situation worse, measurably worse. Yeah. So she'll come into power and she'll just abandon everything she said in the run-up. And we're just clinging to this. It's like a life raft, Colin.
Yes, I agree with you.
Oh, Lordy. 11:27. Anyone else? Got an analysis that doesn't basically boil down to the fact that Liz Truss is lying to the current electorate in the hope of getting over the line so that she can then start conning the bigger electorate. Millie's in Slimbridge in Gloucestershire. I used to go to Slimbridge on school trips, Millie.
Was it good, James? Did you like them?
It was fantastic. It's the bird sanctuary, isn't it?
It certainly is.
Glorious.
Yeah, it is, and it's great at this time of year because everything starts migrating home.
It's a beautiful part of the world. You lucky person. What did you ring in to say?
Thank you. Well, I'm feeling like I might be a massive anticlimax now because the boys and you have all kind of covered a lot of the things I wanted to say.
Okay, well, say it again in a more warm and friendly tone.
Okay, I'll do my best. I mean, I used to be an optimist. I'm finding that a real struggle these days.
Yeah.
And I used to be a Tory voter, full disclosure.
Sure.
I think I was always on the just right of the centre line, and now I think all my life I've been just left of the centre line, but I'm swinging
the centre line has moved.
As I age. That's true.
In the context of the party, it's moved a lot in the last 6 years.
That's true, and that just to put a slightly different twist on the conversation you've had, I think that's also part of this. I won't ever vote Tory again. Never. I can tell you that now. And I'm not usually an absolutist, but I can tell you that. But I do think all genuine One Nation, kind of gently conservative people out there need to, as you would say, give their heads a wobble, because we do need opposing views in politics in this country. So it's no good everybody just rushing to the left-hand side and staying there. We need a challenge. And I just think if you actually do really want to spend the rest of your life voting Conservative, and I admit some quite nice people probably do,
of course,
you should not vote for this Tory party because it's killing the thing you thought you loved. And the only way to save it is to kick it into the long grass.
We're talking about the Faragification of the Tory party, aren't we, really?
Yeah.
With the UKIPification of it, becoming a place where decent people who don't lie awake at night raging about foreigners no longer feel at home. And Liz Truss's comments about France last night are a beautiful example of the Faragification of the whole party.
Unbelievable, isn't it? And it's interesting, isn't it? Because I was never really a Margaret Thatcher fan either, despite my past voting record.
Sure.
But, she knew how to get the best out of people. And she used to flirt with the French.
Yes.
And, put her foot down when she felt she needed it. And whatever you think of her politics, you have to respect the skill of that. She was a fierce politician, and Liz Truss is just a bag of wet washing.
But it was politics, and I don't feel as warmly towards Margaret Thatcher as you do. But
no, I don't feel warmly towards her.
But no, in terms of effect and execution, she. I mean, you're right. This idea that the politics, you might have found her politics repellent, but at least she was playing upon a field of objective reality. At least she was playing upon a field where black was black and white was white. This lot, since Brexit, have been playing on a field where you're entitled to believe whatever you want to believe, and regardless of evidence, and vote accordingly. And God forbid anyone like Emily Maitlis should ever come along and point out that the BBC's been complicit in the whole sorry mess.
In my defence, James, I was going out with somebody in the services when the Falklands was on, and we all had to wave the flag. So she got away with that because she hid behind the Falkland Islands. But I think the thing is, even if you hated her politics, and
Yes.
I did,
Yes.
she, I think, genuinely believed it was right for the country, whereas this lot, I doubt their motives. I don't think
Well,
they're
that's
in it
nicely
for the people
put.
of the country.
I don't care what's good for this country. Well, the phrase national interest popped up on the programme earlier this week for the first time in a long time, because we seem to have forgotten what it is, not least because with Brexit, 52% of the electorate was persuaded to vote against the national interest, albeit in their defence that they thought that they were voting in favour of it. The truth has now emerged. I think Millie's right. I mean, I don't have any warm thoughts really about Margaret Thatcher, except that one there, is she did actually believe that what she was doing was in the national interest. Whose interests does Liz Truss operate in? Whose interests has Boris Johnson operated in? Whose interests does Rishi Sunak operate in? And there perhaps you get the answer to the question of why they haven't all sat down to do anything about the energy crisis, energy bill crisis, because the answer is it's not in their own personal interests to do so. To which I'd suggest that possibly...
Bầu trời chiều không màu nắng ấm, thầm thầm buồn vọng nhớ về đâu. Phương trời xa ai nào hay biết.